Ex-Trump supporters, what point did you stop supporting Trump and why? When he refused to condemn David Duke, ex-head of the KKK, and said that some veterans suffering from combat PTSD were not strong enough. I grew up in a very conservative fundamentalist Christian household that raised the American flag and right-wing politics higher than the Bible. I was taught in church that you can't be a Christian and a Democrat. I voted for Trump in 2016 not because I really liked him, but because I really didn't like Hillary Clinton, or so I was told before I began to think about what I believed for myself. After that year, I was groomed by my brother, who at the time was an infamous figurehead in the alt-right/white supremacist community, damn near the right hand of Richard Spencer. I would listen to his Skype calls with Spencer from the other room because we had fairly thin walls where we lived. At one point, I was actually involved with the white supremacist hate organization that my brother founded, albeit tangentially. I helped cut out flyers and posters that he would post throughout my town and the neighboring ones. In my defense, I knew little to nothing about his organization when I did this, not that that excuses the fact. I can't really tell you when I began thinking differently. I know at some point I realized that there was a lot of what I believed that I only believed because it's what I was always told growing up. Slowly, over the course of the last 6 years, I've gone from being a borderline Trump supporter to someone deeply ashamed of many things my family has taught me growing up. I'm closer of a centrist in the context of global politics, which to my family now means I'm what they could call a raging flaming liberal communist. I still hold my Christian beliefs quite closely, but I'd like to think that they come from a place of love for other people, rather than making sure everything I do is correct and everyone else knows they're wrong. Back in the 80s when he didn't ever pay his contractors. I've hated this prick for 40 years. I don't know how a single person could support him after Puerto Rico. He said their natural disaster broke their budget, begrudgingly visited and tossed paper towels like basketballs, and mocked the pronunciation of the name. Oh yeah, and didn't give a shit that an entire territory was destroyed with thousands of dead Americans. Sharpiegate. Why not just admit you were wrong and move on? Like that the fuck? That idiot took a fucking Sharpie and drew on a map to show he was right on where a hurricane was headed. So fucking stupid. His was the first election I could vote in. I really felt my vote meant so much, so I studied everyone running. I didn't like the options, but the things he would say. Grab her by the puss. For one. If she wasn't his daughter, he'd date her. As a daughter of a horrible man, I didn't want more of that sexism in our nation, and I saw the men at his rallies, I saw them. Not to mention his racism and general message of hate and hypocrisy. My family was so anti-Hillary, so when it came out the night of the election that I'd voted for her, it became a screaming match. I showed them clips of him saying things. They said they won't have this language in their home, and I screamed, "You just put it in the White House," then went to spend the night at a friend's. They now condemn him and act as if they were never behind him. I never was to begin with. I've never been a Republican, but my parents were at one point and my dad still is. We're very close and learned several years ago if we wanted to have a good relationship, we couldn't talk politics. I do know for a fact that he didn't vote for him in 2020. IDK what did it for him, but I do know he's a classic conservative and his opinion began to change when he realized Trump wasn't a Republican. He was just a power-hungry asshole. One of my best friends voted for Trump in 2016, but my other best friend and I just started talking to her logically and without judgment, and she slowly started to come around. Then COVID hit, and as a respiratory therapist at a children's hospital, she just had enough. I think people had one-on-one conversations with the people in their lives, and I know that spewing hate and shame at anyone who ever supported him is not helpful, and one-on-one conversations without judgment help. Thanks for your honesty in this question. I'm enjoying reading the answers. He was fascinating on Letterman in the 1980s, openly sleazy and immoral, self-aggrandizing, a curiosity to watch, difficult to understand how he could be human. Then I realized he was a malignant narcissist running a confidence game and the charm faded. I asked my mom, and her answer was not necessarily Jan 6th, but when he tried to deny, he enticed January 6th. She has come a long way and now realizes she was close to becoming a QAnon lunatic. But now she sees he was a con man. I asked what drew her to him, and she said her disgust with Hillary Clinton drove her away from the Democratic Party and basically into the arms of Trump. Now she's mostly disinterested in politics. I'm from a small town and my dad is a gun-toting Republican. I am very close to my dad and wanted to be just like him in every way possible. I remember when Obama was elected, I was 12 or 13, I cried and I honestly have no idea why. I think I cried because the outcome wasn't what my dad wanted. But I did not know the first thing about politics. When I left for college, I became surrounded by people from all walks of life, ethnicities, genders, sexual orientation, religions, etc., and I grew to love these people and realized how much hatred was being spewed at them from the right. Fast forward 8 years and I joined the military, and because friends with a Hispanic girl whose mom was not able to attend her graduation because she had been deported, while pregnant, trying to go home to visit her sick mother. Her father was here on a visa and her brother was a dreamer. However, because mom was deported, she gave birth to her youngest in Mexico and therefore he did not qualify for the Dreamers Act like she and her other sibling did. The whole motivation for her to join the military was so she could transfer citizenship to her mother, but can no longer do that because of the deportation. Father is legal here as he is on a work visa. She was one of the most hardworking, kindest people I've ever met, and her family were wonderful, hardworking people too. I witnessed firsthand how the right with Republicans treat foreigners and I am disgusted. I also don't believe that any one religion should be dictating this country. For my mom, it was when she was exposed to news sources outside of Fox when she was hospitalized for something, not COVID, and the staff said they didn't get Fox, which had compelling enough arguments that the election was stolen narrative was false. Not me, but my aunt/uncle. COVID did it. They were both MAGA hat-wearing supporters until COVID. My aunt is a retired nurse and was horrified by Trump's lack of leadership. Edit, they did not vote for him a second time. I liked how Obama said it recently on 60 Minutes. I thought and hoped that the weight of the office would dawn on him and make him take things seriously. Unfortunately, that did not happen. That debate where Trump couldn't STFU was one of the alarm bells. I voted for him in 2016. The disappointment started on day one when he continuously lied that his inauguration crowd was the largest ever, and it was all downhill ever since. Truly tedious BS began to pile up, like demanding the Nobel Prize for Bring Peace to Korea, his Charlottesville comments, it's like, come on man, be president. I had to find excuses to keep supporting him. By the end of 2018, the midterms, Trump had his great month-long shutdown and Mattis resigned, and I had determined once and for all he could not be supported. 2019 came around, I was an anti-Trumper, determined to see him out of office. When I realized the only reason I supported him was because of parental influence. My dad was done with him after he insulted McCain post-death, but that lasted about a week. After Home Alone 2. My friend told me it was the day he trusted Putin over the US when it came to election interference. I was never a Trump supporter, but I was a registered Republican for exactly 20 years, dating myself here, and when my license came up for renewal earlier this year, the option to change my party affiliation was on the form and now I'm unaffiliated. I have very little love for the DNC, but the Republicans at large have lost their collective fucking minds. By the current Trumplican standards, I'm a Reno, but to me, they're a fucking embarrassment. When he didn't do anything he listed on his first 100 days. I was out pretty early in the game. As an observant Brit, I think what was obvious to me was that Trump was never interested in presiding over a united America. He just wanted to be president, and as long as he could do enough to keep his supporters on side, then that was enough. He seemed to revel in alienating half the country by ramping up the other half. And he was so unpresidential. I don't think many Americans realize how he was viewed outside of the US. We'd genuinely turn on the news around midday to hear what lunacy he'd been tweeting from his bathroom at 5 a.m. It was a standing joke, or would have been if it hadn't already been abundantly clear for decades that he was a truly dreadful human being. How he was allowed to hijack the Republican Party and run for office will be discussed for a long time yet. Jan 6, 2021. I tossed my MAGA hat in the dumpster the next day. Last time I'll ever place so much faith in one man. Maybe it was a hard lesson I needed to learn. I voted Trump in 2016. I honestly thought putting a businessman in the White House instead of a career politician would slow down the radical divide in this country. Boy, was I wrong. He caused more divide than anyone else in history. He openly trashes liberal beliefs which make up more than half his citizens. I don't need a nice president. But I do need a respectful one. And he's the most disrespectful human being I think I've ever seen. Not a Trump supporter, but I have voted Republican at local, state and Fed level elections many times in the past. Probably more votes for Republican candidates over Dems during my years as a voter. I almost pulled the lever for Trump in 2016. Almost. I'm glad I didn't. So unless something drastically changes with the current GOP, I will never vote for a Republican candidate again. This new GOP is so very disconnected with what most Americans need and want. It's all about power, attention, grift and fealty to one person. And violent reactions to elections if they don't go their way. Think about it. When the daughter of Dick Cheney, the most Republican ever to exist, ditches the GOP, then you know something has gone terribly wrong with the party. Real answer here. To preface, I've always prided myself on being able to understand both sides of a situation and why each side would think the way they do. This is probably what helped in the long run because I like to think I have a pretty open mind most of the time. Trump's election was my very first one as a high school senior at 18. Being in the South, my parents are Republican and raised me as such. Trump was then president through my college years. For his first 2 years, I didn't really think he was doing that bad. And looking back, I still don't think those first 2 years were all that bad. Fast forward to about 2018 or so. I'm halfway through college, surrounded by left-leaning people in a blue county. My personal life really started to go through some changes around this time. All my beliefs were starting to change. All my thoughts, slowly changing. But here's the best part, my thoughts changed because I listened. Not to the left, but to the right. Around 2018 is when I feel the Republicans truly entered an insane era, more than they ever did. Just completely disregarding human life. Then I finally sat down and really listened to Trump speak. The particular speech I listened to was not a high-profile one, but it was complete and utter incompetence. I literally couldn't understand what he was saying, and what I could understand was all hate. Fast forward to the pandemic. This is the point where I think Trump actually reached insanity. Like legit as mental health issues. This is the point where he was created into the person we know now. If he ran his presidency like the first 2 years, I think it would have just left a bad taste. But the way he leapt to the deep end left us with a state of democracy on the verge of extinction. So to sum up everything, Trump is the one that turned me away from the right. Trump and all the hate he brought along. Imagine growing up in a loving, cookie-cutter, Christian family, just to see them feed into the hate that this political party brought. I don't even feel comfortable around my family anymore. I even stopped going to my church. All because they fed into the hate. Edit, fix the word utter. Voted for him in 2016. Thought he was boorish and crude, but if he became president, I thought he'd rise to the office. When he announced he was running and was basically laughed off the page, a vote for him came a vote against elitism. Requirements for president didn't say lifelong politician. Hillary's campaign was more like an anointing than a race. She acted as if she had it in the bag after the primaries were over. She assumed my vote and never worked for it. Fairly early in Trump's term, I changed my tune. He turned the Oval Office into his own little fiefdom. The list goes on, but in general, he acted like a child and lost my vote. Jan 6 solidified that the man should never hold office again. Whether he had anything to do with it, he did, doesn't matter, as he sat there for hours doing nothing about it. Dereliction of his most basic duty. When RBG died and the Republicans shoved in the Supreme Court justice at the end of Trump's term, their hypocrisy was laid bare, and I swore off the party forever, or at least until Democrats would do the same. Republicans can't be trusted. So there you have it.